Ukrainian firefighters battled through the night, extinguishing flames sparked by one of over 100 Russian strikes and decoy drones launched across the country, this one hitting the port city of Odessa, even as the war still burns. European leaders gathered in Paris today with Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky to imagine a day when Kyiv is no longer fighting fires. Members of the Coalition of the Willing discussed security guarantees for a post-war Ukraine. Some in the room, others joining online. Over 30 leaders led by the UK and France. The top line is that 26 of Ukraine's allies have pledged to deploy troops as a reassurance force once the fighting ends, on the ground, at sea and in the air. The bottom line is that the full details are yet to be announced.
At the end of this summit, we decided to launch political and legal efforts to specify these security guarantees with all the coalition's countries, along with Ukraine. Then we also held a call with President Donald Trump, in which we were able to establish all of this. The conclusion of this call is simple. In the following days, we will finalize the American support to these security guarantees. As I said, the United States is involved in every step of this process.
Because the real impact came from who was not in the room today. Earlier, Zelensky had left the Elysee presidential palace to take a call with President Trump after meeting with the US envoy for peace talks, Steve Witkoff. Many European partners want to know if they get involved on the ground, they have an American safety net. Macron says Trump will take part, but that the relevant planning work still needed to be finalized with Washington.
What the Europeans are really asking for is enhanced US commitment. So not boots on the ground, but potentially things such as air cover, so basing US F-35 in Romania. And that's fine in terms of getting that commitment out of President Trump at this present point in time ahead of a potential ceasefire. But that's no guarantee that actually, for example, if European troops were targeted by Russian forces within Ukraine, that Trump would ultimately give the order to use those aircraft to attack, for example, Russian forces.
While European leaders have spent the summer feeling the strain of the war in Ukraine, Putin has been enjoying a season of red carpets, first with Trump in Alaska and now in China. Analysts say he faces little pressure to end the war, just enough to notice, not enough to matter. On the final night of his trip to Beijing, he took questions from friendly Russian reporters, saying he was ready to hold talks with Zelensky if he came to Moscow, but added, is there any point? It's a road to nowhere. He also made it clear that no Western forces should be deployed to Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte hit back, saying Russia had nothing to do with it.
Ukraine is a sovereign nation. If Ukraine wants to have security guarantee forces in Ukraine to support the peace deal, it's up to them. Nobody else can decide about it. And I think we really have to stop making Putin too powerful.
But right now, Putin is still calling the shots. Ukrainians are still sheltering from Russian strikes. And talk of a reassurance force is far from reassuring when you're spending your nights on a cold, hard floor.
Well, earlier I spoke to former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen and began by asking him if Russia had much to fear.
I do not agree that a ceasefire is a prerequisite for providing security guarantees. If we make security guarantees dependent on an end to the Russian attacks on Ukraine, the war will continue. We are giving Putin an incentive to continue the war to avoid Western security guarantees to Ukraine.
And when you look at the assurance force that's being talked about, it's not a great deal of assurance, is it? When it's, maybe tens of thousands of troops compared to a Russian force that runs into the millions.
Yeah, but I think we should see it in the context. The first line of defense will be the Ukrainian forces, and actually they're doing a great job, and I think they're much better at fighting the Russians than European forces would be. I think what we will do would be to deploy European troops behind the Ukrainian lines to protect civilian infrastructure, to protect population centers. I think we could start by helping Ukraine to shoot down Russian missiles and drones.
I mean, clearly the US role in all of this is crucial, and US air defense in particular. But Trump is pretty non-committal about that. Do we need to worry about that?
Yes, but I think if Trump wants this war to end, then he would have to provide what we call a backstop to help Europe provide the security guarantees. Obviously, the bulk of the work will be European, but we will need assistance from the US to make that deterrence credible in the eyes of Russia.
I mean, obviously, something that would worry Moscow is punitive economic sanctions. Now, Donald Trump's been threatening that kind of move for many months now, 6 months, something like that. Hasn't happened. How much time do you think Putin's got on this?
Well, so far, it's incomprehensible that President Trump is so accommodating towards the Russian requests and wishes. But I think President Trump may now be losing the patience, because it's clear that Putin is dragging out this war. Putin has no incentive whatsoever to engage in peace negotiations.
Trump sort of taunted Europe's leaders, saying, you know, they need to stop buying Russian oil themselves. Has he got a point on that?
Yes, I'm disappointed to see that while Europe has decreased its dependence on imported Russian gas and oil, we are still providing or fueling the Russian warfare in Ukraine by purchasing Russian oil and gas. I think we should stop that as soon as possible, stop it completely. What we do need now is to create a strong coalition of the willing. We cannot use the existing institutional frameworks like the European Union or NATO. A coalition of the willing led by France and the UK will be the way forward. I hope this coalition of the willing will not be the coalition of the waiting. Time and speed matter.
Anders Rasmussen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.